The night they vanished. There are moments when a single sound changes the entire course of your life. For me, it was the quiet squeak of my car's brakes that Tuesday evening, the same sound I'd heard every day after work, except this time, it was followed by a silence so unnatural it made my heart ache. I didn't know it then, but my sister had already stolen my husband, and together they had left me with a child they expected to die. It was one of those crisp autumn evenings when the air smelled of wet leaves and faint smoke from distant chimneys. The world looked harmless, golden, gentle, ordinary. My only plans were leftovers, maybe a bath, and silence. Sharon was supposed to come by soon to pick up Kyle, her 5-year-old son, my nephew who'd become my weekend shadow. I loved that boy, his wide, serious eyes, the way he whispered questions, as if afraid his thoughts were too big for the world, but I was tired. My bones carried the kind of fatigue that coffee can't wash away. I just wanted to rest. When I turned the key, I expected the usual chaos, the faint hum of the TV, Keith calling from the den, maybe Kyle's laughter echoing from the hallway. But the house that greeted me was heavy and still, as if it had been holding its breath too long. No TV, no footsteps, not even the sound of the refrigerator humming. The kind of silence that feels alive, like something watching. "Keith?" I called out, trying to sound normal. My voice bounced back at me, hollow. "Sharon, I'm home." Only the echo answered. My heels pressed softly into the carpet as I moved through the living room. Everything was too neat, the coffee table magazines squared perfectly, the remotes lined in a row, even the couch cushions puffed and arranged. Keith wasn't neat. He left crumbs, socks, chaos. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, sharp and wrong. And then I saw him. Kyle. He was curled in the big armchair by the window, the one that used to be my father's, his small arms wrapped around a throw pillow as if it were a life raft. His eyes wide, glassy, not crying, just watching me, waiting. My heart twisted so violently I could barely breathe. I rushed over and dropped to my knees. "Kyle, honey," I whispered, brushing his damp hair back from his forehead. "Where is everybody?" He didn't speak. His lower lip trembled, but no sound came out. He looked like a photograph of fear. "Is your mommy here, Uncle Keith?" I asked again, softer this time. He shook his head, a quick, broken movement, and slowly unclenched one hand from the pillow. In it was a small square of paper, crumpled and warm from his palm. He held it out to me without a word. For a moment I just stared at it. That little folded note felt heavier than the world. My fingers trembled as I took it, smoothing out the wrinkles. The familiar looping handwriting hit me like a punch. Sharon's handwriting. Always rounded, girlish, cheerful. But the words were poison. "Brenda, I'm so sorry to do this in a letter. By the time you read this, Keith and I will be gone. We're in love. We can finally be happy. I can't take Kyle, it's not the right place for a child. I know you'll take care of him. Please don't try to find us. Sharon." I read it twice, maybe 3 times, my eyes blurring until the letters melted into one another. My mind refused to understand what my eyes already knew. Keith and Sharon, my husband, my sister. Together. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. There had to be an explanation, a mistake, a cruel joke. I staggered into the kitchen, clutching the note like a lifeline. My phone slipped in my shaking hands as I dialed Keith's number. Straight to voicemail. Sharon's too. Their cheerful recorded voices sounded like strangers. That's when I saw it. On the counter beside the fruit bowl, a neat stack of papers. I lifted them with trembling hands. The top page read, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." My name, his signature. His plan. The world narrowed to a ringing in my ears. My vision blurred at the edges, and I had to grab the counter to stay upright. 10 years of marriage reduced to a signature. 10 years of shared breakfasts and arguments and Christmas mornings, all rewritten in a single moment. Behind me, I felt a tug on my sleeve. "Aunt Brenda?" Kyle whispered. "Mommy and Uncle Keith went on a trip." A trip. That's what they'd told him. Something inside me cracked. The rage came first, white, sharp, consuming, then grief so deep it made my chest ache. But when I looked down at that little boy, the tears didn't fall. My body went still. I knelt and gathered him into my arms. He was trembling, small as a bird, and I could feel his heart hammering against my chest. "It's okay," I murmured, though my throat burned with lies. "You're safe. I've got you." He buried his face in my shoulder, and I felt something shift inside me, the faint, terrible understanding that he and I had both been abandoned, and that now, somehow, I would have to be enough for both of us. Later, when the house was dark and Kyle finally fell asleep in the guest room, I sat alone on the floor of my kitchen, with the letter open beside me. The refrigerator hummed again, the only sound left in the world. I pressed my palm flat over the paper and whispered into the silence, "You'll regret this, Sharon. You'll regret every word." But what I didn't know then was that this wasn't just the night my marriage ended. It was the night my life began again, as something fiercer, lonelier, and infinitely stronger. The lie about a dying child. People always say that betrayal doesn't happen overnight, that it starts small, like hairline cracks in glass. But when I looked back later, I realized Sharon's cracks had been there all along, hidden beneath laughter and perfume, and that helpless, childlike charm she used to get everyone to clean up her messes. I just hadn't wanted to see it. Months before she ran away, she had come to me in tears, shaking so hard I thought she'd been in an accident. I'd been in the garden that morning, trying to coax my sad tomato plants into life, when her car screeched into the driveway, gravel spraying. She stumbled out, her face streaked with mascara and terror. I dropped the watering can and ran to her. "Sharon, what happened?" I asked, my voice already breaking. "It's Kyle," she gasped, clutching my arms. "Oh God, Brenda, it's Kyle." Those words went through me like a blade. I pulled her inside, sat her down at the kitchen table, and made tea with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. She sat hunched over, sobbing into her palms, and every part of me wanted to fix whatever it was. I was her older sister. That was my job to fix things. Finally she looked up. Her eyes were red, swollen, her breathing shallow. "They did tests," she whispered. "Blood tests. He's got a rare blood disorder. They said it's terminal." I froze. "What? No, that can't." She cut me off with a choked sound, shaking her head violently. "They said 6 months, maybe less. There's no cure, no treatment, nothing." My mind went blank. I remember the teacup slipping from my hand, shattering on the floor, but I didn't even hear it. I just stared at her, the world tilting around me. Kyle, that quiet, gentle boy with the sunniest smile, dying? Sharon covered her face again and wailed. "I can't do it, Bren. I can't sit there and watch him fade away. Every time he coughs, I feel like I'm dying too. I can't. And I believed her. God help me, I believed every trembling word. I gathered her in my arms and let her cry until her sobs turned to hiccups. "You don't have to go through this alone," I whispered. "Whatever you need, money, time, help, I'll do it. I'll do anything." She pulled back, eyes glassy and pleading. Could you take him sometimes? Just for a few days? I need to breathe, Bren. Just to be myself for a little while." Of course I said yes. What else could I have said? She nodded, almost too quickly, like she'd already expected my answer. Now, looking back, I remember the faintest glint of relief in her eyes. Not gratitude, not grief, but release. As if she'd just set down a burden she never planned to pick back up. That weekend, Kyle came over with a small duffel bag and his favorite stuffed dinosaur. Sharon looked exhausted, her hair messy, her makeup smudged. But when I hugged her goodbye, I caught a faint smell of perfume, something floral and expensive. At the time, I thought she was trying to keep herself together, trying to look like herself in a crumbling world. But it wasn't that. It was a woman still performing, still building a lie she could walk away from. That night, I tucked Kyle into the guest bed. He smiled sleepily, his little hand finding mine. "Aunt Bren," he whispered, "Mommy said I'm sick, but I don't feel sick." I kissed his forehead and forced a smile. "You're just tired, sweetheart. You'll feel better soon." But the words left a bitter taste in my mouth. He didn't look sick, pale, maybe, quiet, but not dying. I brushed it off, blaming stress and denial. I told myself, maybe Sharon was right. Maybe this was the first stage. Maybe he'd get weaker over time. I didn't know then that I was being fed a script, every word rehearsed to make me the perfect caretaker for her escape plan. Over the next few weeks, she brought Kyle more often. Sometimes she'd call with that fragile, breathless voice. "I can't do it today, Bren. He cried all night. I just need to rest." And I'd say, "Of course, bring him over." The first few times, she came back for him tearful, apologetic, overflowing with gratitude. "You're a saint," she'd say, hugging me tightly. "I don't know what I'd do without you." But then, the visits got shorter, the hugs looser, her thanks more perfunctory. And when she drove away one Sunday afternoon, I watched her in the rearview mirror, the way she adjusted her lipstick, the faint smile playing at her mouth as she pulled onto the road, and something cold crawled up my spine. There was no grief in that woman's face, no despair, only relief. I didn't know it yet, but that was the day Sharon stopped pretending to be a mother and started pretending to be innocent. If I'd been paying closer attention, I might have seen it happening in real time, the slow erasure of a mother from her child's life. But betrayal never walks in wearing a villain's face. It comes softly, dressed like exhaustion, or framed by excuses that sound like grief. At first, Sharon's visits were still regular. She'd show up on Friday nights with Kyle's little backpack, eyes puffy from fake tears, and a new handbag slung over her shoulder. She'd say she just needed a few days to clear her head, and I'd nod, convinced I was helping her cope. But then those few days became a week, then two, and every time she came to pick Kyle up, her perfume lingered longer than her hugs. Keith, meanwhile, played the part of the perfect husband. He'd ruffle Kyle's hair, smile that easy smile of his, and tell me, "You're doing a good thing, Bren. Family's family." I remember the warmth that spread through me when he said it, the quiet gratitude of being seen. I didn't know then that he was using my kindness as cover for his deceit. I'd find his shirt smelling faintly of wine and someone else's shampoo. I'd tell myself it was the scent of office dinners, late nights, the grind of a man carrying stress home in invisible ways. Love teaches you to lie to yourself long before anyone else does. Life settled into a strange rhythm. I'd wake up, pack Kyle's lunch, always the bland, colorless foods Sharon said were the only things he could eat, and go to work. Then I'd come home to him waiting by the window, small and quiet, watching for headlights that never appeared. Some nights he'd ask, "Is Mommy coming?" And I'd lie through my teeth, whispering, "Maybe tomorrow, sweetheart." He'd nod, accept it, and curl up on the couch with his dinosaur tucked under his chin. Children have a way of believing what they need to, even when the truth is clawing at the edges. As the months went on, Sharon's check-ins became sporadic. Sometimes she'd call, her voice bright and distracted. "Sorry, I've been busy, Bren. Work's a nightmare. How's my little man?" I'd tell her Kyle missed her. She'd sigh dramatically. "I'll come by soon." But she never did. Then one night, a friend of mine, Jessica, called. Her voice had that careful, hesitant tone people use when they're about to tell you something you won't want to hear. "Bren, I ran into Sharon downtown," she said. "Downtown?" I asked, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "She's supposed to be working nights this week." "That's the thing," Jessica said softly. "She wasn't working. She was at the Grapevine, that new wine bar, laughing with a group of people, dressed to the nines. She looked fine, more than fine." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. "Are you sure?" "Positive. She was wearing that red dress you always said made her look like trouble." Jessica tried to make it a joke, but it landed like a knife. I hung up and stood in the kitchen, staring at nothing. For the first time, I let myself feel it, that dark, rising suspicion that maybe Sharon wasn't grieving at all. Maybe she was celebrating. When she finally came by the next weekend, I decided to test it. "You look good," I said quietly. She smiled, a quick flash of teeth. "You think so? I've been trying to take better care of myself, for my mental health, you know." Her mental health. I almost laughed. But I kept my tone calm. "You were out the other night, weren't you?" Her eyes flicked up sharply. "Who told you that?" I shrugged. "Just someone who saw you. I'm glad you're able to get out, that's all." She hesitated, then exhaled in relief, misreading my tone. "Yeah, it's been nice. I can't sit home crying every night, can I?" That was the first time she said it out loud, the shift from tragedy to justification. I realized then that I wasn't dealing with a broken sister anymore. I was dealing with someone rewriting her own story, one excuse at a time. The following month, she missed Kyle's birthday. No call, no gift, not even a message. I baked a small cake myself and helped him blow out the candles while he whispered his own wish. I hope Mommy comes back. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat by his bed for a long time, watching him breathe. I thought about calling Sharon, about screaming down the phone, demanding answers. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the stillness of the house, or the way Kyle's little hand rested open beside him as if he was trusting the world not to hurt him in his sleep. I knew then that I couldn't rely on her anymore. Still, I wasn't ready to accept that she was gone for good. It took one last confrontation to burn away my denial completely. She was supposed to pick him up at 6 that Sunday. At 9, I was pacing the living room, dialing her number over and over, straight to voicemail. Midnight came before I heard her car. She breezed through the door like she was late for lunch, not 12 hours missing. Her perfume hit me first, heavy and sweet. "Where have you been?" I snapped. "Do you have any idea how worried I was?" She rolled her eyes. "Relax, Bren. I lost track of time." "Lost track? Your son has been waiting for you all day." "He's fine, isn't he?" She shot back, brushing past me toward the kitchen. "God, you're always so dramatic. I needed a break." "A break?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw her clearly. The soft skin, the expensive dress, the faint smirk she couldn't quite hide. She wasn't grieving. She was living exactly the life she wanted. I wanted to scream, to tell her she was destroying her own child, but the words wouldn't come. I think some part of me already knew that this was goodbye, that I'd never see my sister the same way again. The next time I heard her name, it was written in the loops of a goodbye note left for a 5-year-old boy. Grief has a sound. It's not crying, not the sharpness of screams or the breaking of glass. It's quiet or the click of a lock in an empty house, the hum of an unanswered phone, the way silence turns heavy enough to crush your chest. That's the sound I lived in after that night. Once the first shock of Sharon's letter passed, I stopped feeling like a sister or a wife. I felt like a witness at the scene of my own life's wreckage. My home, once warm and noisy, now felt staged like the ghost of a life someone had already left behind. Even the furniture seemed to stare at me in pity. I found myself walking through each room, as though retracing footsteps that no longer existed. Keith's jacket still hung by the door. His cologne still clung faintly to the air. A pair of Sharon's earrings, gold hoops I'd loaned her months ago, sat forgotten on the counter beside the sink. It was as if the world had frozen mid-breath, leaving only the evidence of their betrayal behind. For the next hour, I sat at the kitchen table, the letter open in front of me. I read it over and over until I knew every word by heart, until the paper went limp with the moisture of my hands. I kept thinking, how many nights had they planned this? How many dinners had they shared with me, laughing over wine, while hiding this secret under their tongues like poison? A part of me wanted to tear the house apart, to break something, to make the outside world look as ruined as I felt inside. But instead, I went still. I sat there, staring at the fruit bowl on the counter, and thought of Kyle. He was asleep in the guest room, a child who thought his mother and uncle had gone on a trip. I imagined him waking up in the morning, asking where they were, waiting by the window, still believing they might come back. The thought was unbearable. So I stood up, grabbed the divorce papers, and tore them in half. The sound that clean rip gave me the smallest taste of control. I took our wedding photo from the mantle, the one from our 10th anniversary, and burned it in the sink. I watched the flames curl around the edges of our smiling faces, watched the ashes collapse into nothing. It was the only thing that made sense. Later, I crept into Kyle's room. The nightlight painted soft halos across the walls. His tiny chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, and he clutched his stuffed dinosaur tight against his chest. I sat on the edge of his bed and touched his hair. It was so soft, so light. My throat tightened. I whispered, "It's just you and me now, sweetheart. I promise I'll never leave you. Never." The words came out of me like a vow carved in stone, and for the first time that night, I stopped feeling powerless. The rage, the heartbreak, they quieted, leaving something stronger underneath. Something fierce. I didn't know how I was going to do it, how to raise a child on my salary, How to explain to the world why my husband and my sister had vanished together, but none of that mattered. All I knew was that I couldn't fail him. The next morning, I woke up before dawn and made pancakes. The smell of butter filled the kitchen, warm and defiant. Kyle padded in, his hair messy, his dinosaur dragging behind him. "Where's Mommy?" he asked softly. I crouched to his level and cupped his face in my hands. "She had to go away for a while, sweetie. But I'm here. I'll take care of you." He studied me with those solemn eyes, and for a second, I thought he might see through me, see the heartbreak hiding behind my calm. But then he nodded, small and brave. "Okay," he whispered. And in that moment, something shifted between us. He wasn't just my nephew anymore. He was mine, my responsibility, my child, my reason. That night, after I tucked him in, I sat on the back porch wrapped in an old blanket. The autumn wind moved through the trees, carrying the faint smell of rain. I looked up at the sky and whispered into the darkness. "You took everything from me, Sharon, but you left me something better. You left me him." I didn't realize then that what I'd just said would become prophecy, that Kyle would save me in ways I couldn't yet imagine, and that one day, I'd save him right back. For a while, I lived on autopilot. Days blurred into nights, routines became armor, and I convinced myself that if I just kept moving, I wouldn't have to think about what I'd lost. Kyle was my compass, his small voice asking for breakfast, his soft laughter when cartoons came on, the weight of his hand in mine when we crossed the street. Every motion tethered me to something real. But underneath the rhythm of our new life, there was a constant hum of worry. He was too quiet, too pale. He tired easily. Sometimes he'd sit on the rug with his toy cars and just stare at them, as if the effort to make them move was too much. I told myself this was what terminal illness looked like, that Sharon had been telling the truth about the blood disorder. Every symptom matched the lie she'd planted. But the more I watched him, the more I felt something was off. It wasn't just the fatigue or his thin frame. It was the hollowness behind his eyes, the way his little body seemed to be waiting for permission to exist. I'd feed him exactly what Sharon had said he could tolerate: strawberry jelly, bananas, white bread with no crust. He'd nibble without complaint, then push the plate away. Once, I tried to sneak in some scrambled eggs, and he threw up after a single bite. It terrified me. I called Sharon's old number that night, but it went straight to voicemail. I almost begged her to tell me what to do. Then I remembered she'd forfeited the right to that question. Weeks passed. The house filled with tiny signs of a life still half shared. The drawings Kyle taped to the fridge, the small socks that never stayed paired, the quiet sound of his breathing when I checked on him at night. I was learning to be a mother in the ruins of someone else's choices. But I couldn't ignore my gut any longer. Mothers, even the kind who never planned to be, have instincts that scream when something isn't right, and mine was screaming. The breaking point came one Sunday afternoon at the playground. The air smelled of grass and melted ice cream, and the children's laughter rippled like music. Kyle wanted to try the swings, so I pushed him gently, my hands at his small back, feeling the fragile bones beneath his shirt. "Higher, Aunt Bren," he giggled, his voice thin but happy. I laughed and pushed again, but after only a few swings he went quiet. "I'm tired," he murmured, barely audible. I slowed the swing until it stopped, and he slumped against me. His skin was cool, his breath shallow. Within minutes, he was asleep in my lap, his head heavy against my chest. My heart twisted. Children weren't supposed to run out of energy after 5 minutes on a swing. When we got home, I sat at the kitchen table long after he'd fallen asleep on the couch, staring at the wall until the decision finally crystallized. I didn't care what Sharon had said. I was taking him to a doctor. A real one. Someone who'd look at him without bias, without the script my sister had written. The next morning, I called the city hospital and asked for an appointment with the best pediatric hematologist they had. The receptionist mentioned the cost. I didn't care. I'd been saving money for years, a little inheritance my grandmother had left me. I used to think I'd spend it traveling or renovating the kitchen. Now I knew what it was really for. When we arrived at the hospital, Kyle clung to my hand, his small fingers cold and sticky. The antiseptic smell hit me like a wall, sharp and sterile. I told him it would be okay, though I was trembling inside. Dr. Evans walked in, a calm woman with silver hair and eyes that didn't miss a thing. She knelt in front of Kyle and smiled softly. "Hi, buddy. I hear you've been feeling tired." He nodded shyly. "Sometimes." She looked at me next, and something about her gaze made me feel seen, not as a desperate aunt, but as someone fighting for her child. I explained everything: Sharon's story, the supposed diagnosis, the list of restricted foods. She listened quietly, writing notes, her expression unreadable. When the nurse came to draw blood, Kyle didn't flinch. He just watched the red line fill the tube, then looked up at me. "Will this make me better?" he asked. I bit my lip. "Yes, sweetheart, it will help us understand how to make you stronger." We waited in the sterile quiet for what felt like hours. The ticking clock sounded like a heartbeat. Finally, Dr. Evans returned, holding a folder. She sat down, her face serious but not grim. "Brenda," she said gently, "I've reviewed Kyle's blood work. I want you to take a deep breath." My stomach dropped. I braced for the words "6 months left," for the kind of sentence that splits a life in two. But what she said instead made the room tilt. "Kyle doesn't have a blood disorder. He's not terminally ill. In fact, his results show something entirely different." I blinked. "What do you mean?" She leaned forward. "He's severely malnourished. His iron, his vitamins, everything, they're dangerously low. Brenda, this boy isn't dying from disease, he's starving." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. The word starving echoed through my skull like thunder. Dr. Evans's tone was calm, but there was fire in her eyes. "This isn't a medical mystery. This is neglect. Prolonged, deliberate neglect." Neglect. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even cry. The truth hit with the weight of every sleepless night, every small meal I'd made, every time I'd wondered why his eyes seemed too dull for a child's. Sharon hadn't just lied to me, she'd nearly killed her own son. When I finally found my voice, it came out in a whisper. "Can he recover?" Dr. Evans nodded. "Yes, with time, care, and proper nutrition. His body's young, it can heal." I pressed my hands to my face and let out a broken sound, half sob, half laugh. Relief and fury tangled inside me until I could barely breathe. That night, after Kyle fell asleep, I stood by his bed and watched him. His hair glowed faintly in the nightlight's warmth. I thought about Sharon, the woman who had lied so easily, who had handed me her child with a smile and walked away. I realized that whatever part of me had once loved her had died too. From that moment on, I wasn't just his aunt, I was his rescuer. And if it took the rest of my life, I would make sure he never went hungry again. Not for food, not for love, not for anything. I stopped seeing my kitchen as just a place to eat. It became a battlefield, one where love, patience, and defiance fought against years of neglect. Every spoonful of soup, every small bite Kyle took, felt like an act of rebellion against Sharon's cruelty. Dr. Evans gave me a strict plan. Small meals, nutrient-dense food, patience above all. I taped the list to the refrigerator door like a prayer. My grocery cart, once filled with frozen dinners and coffee, was now stacked with vegetables, chicken, lentils, and vitamins. The cashier smiled at me once and said, "Feeding an army?" I almost told her, "Just saving one soldier." At first it was a struggle. Kyle's body didn't trust food. He'd wrinkle his nose, push the spoon away, shake his head when I begged. "It doesn't taste right," he'd whisper. I never forced him. I coaxed, I joked, I played pretend. "Look," I'd say softly, "the carrots are little rockets. They'll make you fly." Sometimes he smiled, sometimes he didn't. But he tried, and that was enough. The first time he finished a bowl of chicken broth, I felt tears sting my eyes. "You did it," I whispered, as if he'd just conquered the world. He looked shy, proud, and for the first time in months, there was a flicker of light in his eyes. Days turned into weeks, and I learned to listen to his body, the way he'd lean into warmth, the way he'd rest after eating, the way his laughter came back slowly, hesitant but real. The dark circles faded from under his eyes. His little legs started to carry him farther each day, to the park, to the corner store, then racing down the hallway when he thought I wasn't watching. One morning, he ran into the kitchen barefoot and shouted, "I'm hungry!" It startled me so much I dropped the ladle. He laughed, and that sound, that clean, ringing laugh, felt like sunlight after years of rain. Bit by bit, he became a boy again, not a ghost. He painted messy pictures, built lopsided Lego castles, and filled the house with noise I didn't realize I'd been starving for. At night, I'd find his small socks in the laundry and smile because they were dirty proof that he was living, growing, moving through the world. And then, one small moment changed everything. We were in the grocery store, his hand in mine. He was 6 by then, strong enough to tug me toward the cereal aisle. His eyes landed on a bright blue box with cartoon animals on it. "Mom, can we get this one?" I froze. The word hung between us, soft, accidental, but true. He hadn't even noticed what he'd said. He was still pointing at the box, waiting for my answer. My throat tightened. I crouched down and brushed his hair from his forehead. "No, not that one," I whispered, smiling through the ache in my chest. "But you can pick out any fruit you want." He grinned and ran ahead, the words still echoing in my ears. Mom. It felt both foreign and perfect, like a name I'd been meant to wear all along. That night, when I tucked him in, I whispered, "Good night, sweetheart." He mumbled sleepily, "Good night, Mom." I sat beside his bed long after he drifted off, the rhythm of his breathing steady and sure. It struck me then that healing isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with miracles or grand gestures. It happens in tiny moments, a full stomach, a quiet laugh, a child's trust rebuilt spoonful by spoonful. I had no husband, no sister, no one left from the life I once knew. But in that small house, with its flickering nightlight and the smell of chicken soup lingering in the air, I realized I wasn't alone. I had a family, one that began not by blood, but by choice. 15 years can change everything and nothing at all. Sometimes I'd catch myself setting 2 plates at the table out of habit. One small, one large, even though Kyle was grown and ate like an athlete. The quiet hum of the refrigerator still filled the house, but it no longer sounded like loneliness. It sounded like life, steady, ordinary, earned. Kyle was 20 now, tall, confident, the kind of man people instinctively trusted. He was in his 2nd year of college, studying pre-med of all things. "So I can fix what people like Sharon break," he once joked with a sad smile, though he never called her by name. We didn't speak of her much. She'd become more myth than memory, a shadow cast far behind us. The house had changed with us. The walls that once held echoes of betrayal now carried laughter, late-night study sessions, the smell of coffee and textbooks. My dining table was buried under medical journals and open laptops, and I loved it that way. It was proof that something I'd built had survived more than survived. It had thrived. I thought the past was finished. I thought silence meant peace. But fate has a cruel way of testing your healing when you least expect it. It happened on a Saturday afternoon. I was standing in the dairy aisle at the supermarket, half lost in thought, comparing cartons of whole milk and 2%. My list was crumpled in my hand, and I remember thinking how quiet and gentle that moment was, the kind of small, forgettable peace you never question. Then a voice, slightly raspier than I remembered, broke the stillness. "Brenda, is that you?" The sound of my name stopped me cold. The air thickened. My hand froze over the milk cartons as that old instinct, the one that had once lived in constant panic, roared back to life. I turned slowly, and there she was. Sharon. 15 years older, heavier, her hair dull and brassy, but unmistakably her. That same practiced smile, the same tilt of the head she used when she wanted forgiveness without asking for it. "Sharon," I said, my voice barely my own. "Oh, it is you," she chirped, stepping closer, as if time had been kind to her conscience. "You look, well." I wanted to laugh. Well, what a polite word for someone you'd left gutted in the ruins of your betrayal. Before I could answer, another voice joined in, one I hadn't heard in a decade and a half, but my body remembered instantly. Keith. He rounded the corner of the aisle, a little heavier, hair thinning, but that same smug grin plastered across his face. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "Brenda Rivers in the flesh. Time's been generous." His eyes roamed over me with that old, arrogant familiarity that used to make my skin crawl. My jaw tightened, but I stayed silent. They didn't deserve my anger. He slung an arm around Sharon's shoulders. You two should catch up, he teased. Talk about old times. Old times. The words nearly made me laugh, the kind of hollow laugh that breaks in your throat before it reaches your lips. What do you want, Sharon? I asked quietly. She smiled, that syrupy, performative smile. Nothing really. I just saw you and thought, why not say hello? It's been so long. Surely you're not still upset, right? I mean, it's been 15 years. Upset. As if what she'd done could be measured by something as small as emotion. I took a slow breath. You left your son to die, Sharon. That doesn't expire. Her smile faltered for the first time, but she recovered quickly. Oh, come on, Brenda. You make it sound so dramatic. You raised him, didn't you? It must have been fulfilling. Her words hung in the air like acid. Fulfilling, I repeated softly, my voice shaking now, not from weakness but restraint. Keith chuckled. Yeah, Bren, how is that little brat? What was his name again? Matt? Brad? I turned to him, my voice steady as ice. His name is Kyle. They both paused, the same cruel amusement curling their lips. Right, Kyle, Sharon said, rolling her eyes. That little failed experiment. Is he still around? Failed experiment. The world around me seemed to dim, the hum of freezers, the shuffle of carts, the chatter of strangers all faded under the sound of my pulse pounding in my ears. Yes, I said, he's around. Keith smirked. Still single, Bren? Guess you missed your chance, huh? Sharon and I, we're still madly in love. Their laughter echoed down the aisle, careless and ugly. But strangely, I felt calm. I didn't raise my voice or flinch. I just looked at them. Really looked. Two people aged by their own rot, still clinging to arrogance because it's all they had left. Sharon flipped her hair and sighed. Oh well, it's all in the past now, right? You can't hold grudges forever. Besides, she smiled, smug again. You got a child out of it. Seems like it worked out for everyone. It took everything in me not to slap that smirk from her face. Instead, I smiled faintly. You're right, I said. It did work out. And in that quiet, deliberate calm, I realized something. I wasn't the woman they'd left behind anymore. I had outgrown the wreckage they thought would bury me. They didn't know it yet, but this time, I wasn't the one who was about to break. I used to wonder what I'd do if I ever saw them again, if I'd cry, if I'd shout, if I'd demand answers for the years they stole. But standing there under the fluorescent supermarket lights, watching them smirk like nothing had ever happened, I realized the truth. I didn't need their answers. I was the answer. Sharon kept talking, her voice lilting with the same casual cruelty she'd used 15 years ago. You can't still be bitter, Bren. You got the better deal, didn't you? Kyle got to live with you. You got to play mom. And look at me, I had to start over from scratch. It all evens out. Her words were airless, like she'd been rehearsing that narrative to herself for years. Keith laughed, the sound low and mocking. Still alone, huh? I figured a woman like you would have remarried by now. Guess that ship sailed. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. They mistook my silence for shame, but it wasn't silence, it was stillness, the same kind that comes before a storm. Then Sharon sighed dramatically, like she was bored. Well, at least Kyle gave you something to do. Kids keep people like you busy. People like me. That was when it happened, the moment something inside me clicked into place, like a lock finally turning. I smiled, slow and deliberate. Speaking of kids, I said, tilting my head slightly. You have one too, don't you? A daughter, right? Keith's chest puffed with pride. Sure do. 14. Bright. Beautiful. Perfect. She's the best thing that ever happened to us. But when I looked at Sharon, I saw it, a flicker, a tremor beneath her mask, the way her fingers twitched against her purse strap, the way her eyes darted sideways. Fear. So, I continued softly, you got pregnant right after you left, huh? Must have been, what, less than a year later? Sharon's eyes snapped to mine, her expression tight. That's none of your business. Keith chuckled, oblivious. Oh, it's fine. She's mine. Born a year after we started our new life. I watched Sharon flinch. It was tiny, almost invisible, but it was there, a single heartbeat of guilt. That was all I needed. You sure about that? I asked calmly. The aisle went silent. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to fade. Keith frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I shrugged. Just seems convenient. The timing, the secrecy. And considering how busy Sharon was back then, it's impressive she found time to be so devoted to just one man. Sharon's face drained of color. Brenda, stop. No, I said, my voice steady, almost gentle. I think Keith deserves to know the truth. After all, I did hire a private investigator once after you both disappeared. He told me quite a bit about your sister's afternoons off, Keith. The ones you thought she spent working overtime or grieving. Keith's eyes widened. What? Oh yes, I continued, every word slow and deliberate. While you were at work, Sharon was out. Fancy lunches, wine bars, new dresses, all paid for by a revolving cast of men. She called you her steady one, though. Said you were reliable, predictable, her safety net. Sharon's hand flew to her chest. You're lying! I smiled faintly. Am I? Keith turned to her, his face pale. Tell me she's lying, Sharon. But she couldn't. Her mouth opened, closed, trembled. She's twisting things, Sharon stammered. I went out with friends. Friends? Keith cut her off, his voice sharp now. You were seeing other men? The cracks began to show. The smirk he'd worn like armor crumbled. Is our daughter even mine? Of course she's yours, Sharon cried, her voice breaking. How could you even… I didn't wait for her to finish. There's an easy way to find out, I said smoothly. A simple DNA test, quick, painless, definitive. The color drained completely from Sharon's face. No, she shouted too quickly. That's not necessary. She's his, she's ours. Keith stared at her for a long moment, the silence stretching tight as wire. His hands trembled. You've been lying to me this whole time, he said, voice barely above a whisper. She's making this up, Sharon said desperately, turning to me. Why are you doing this? Haven't you taken enough? I took a step closer. Enough? You left a child to starve and vanish into your own freedom. You built your happiness on my ruin. So no, Sharon, I haven't taken enough. I'm just finishing what you started. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Keith's voice was quiet when it finally returned. I want a test. Sharon's face twisted in panic. No, Keith. He pulled away from her. I want a test. The silence that followed was the sound of something breaking, not loud or violent, but permanent. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I simply picked up my shopping basket, turned toward them both, and said, You two wanted to ruin a family 15 years ago. Looks like you finally succeeded. Then I walked away. Behind me, I heard Sharon's voice splinter, sharp and frantic, while Keith stayed low and cold. The sound of truth had finally found them, and for once, I didn't have to raise mine. I'd barely made it to the end of the aisle when I heard a voice behind me, calm, steady, familiar in a way that stilled the entire world. Mom, are you ready? I turned, and there he was. Kyle. Tall, poised, dressed in a crisp navy suit that caught the supermarket's fluorescent light like quiet armor. His face, the same one that had once been small and fragile under the glow of a nightlight, now carried confidence, gentleness, and something deeper, peace. My heart clenched. Oh, sweetheart, I murmured, smiling despite the sting behind my eyes. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to keep you waiting. He walked over and rested a reassuring hand on my shoulder. It's fine, he said softly. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. Behind us, the silence broke. Sharon's voice came out barely a whisper. Is that Kyle? Her hand flew to her mouth as if saying his name out loud might undo the past. Keith's smirk vanished. He stared at the man standing before him, healthy, strong, alive, and looked as though the ground had given way beneath his feet. Yes, I said, my voice steady. This is Kyle, the boy you left behind, the one you expected to die. Keith's mouth opened, but no words came. Kyle's gaze didn't waver. I remember everything, he said quietly. Even though I was young, I remember. The stillness that followed was absolute. The hum of the refrigerators, the distant chatter of other shoppers, it all disappeared under his words. I remember the times you left me alone when strange men came over, Kyle continued. his voice even but cold. I remember being hungry and scared, and I remember the day you both left me, thinking I wouldn't survive. Sharon began to cry loud, theatrical sobs that once fooled everyone but didn't move either of us now. Kyle, no, please, she stammered. I was sick, I was confused. No, he said, cutting her off. You were selfish. His words didn't carry anger, they carried truth, and it was far heavier. He turned his gaze to Keith, who looked smaller now, shoulders slumped, eyes wet. And you, Kyle said, you helped her. You let her leave me. You signed papers that made me disposable. Keith swallowed hard. I didn't know. Yes, you did, Kyle said simply. You just didn't care. There was nothing left for them to say. I stood there, beside the boy I'd raised into a man, and felt a kind of stillness I hadn't known since before the betrayal, not emptiness, but closure. Sharon wept harder, trying to reach for him, but Kyle stepped back. Don't, he said, his tone calm but final. You lost the right to call yourself my mother a long time ago. He turned to me then, his eyes softening. Let's go home, Mom. Those words, Mom, still had the power to undo me. I nodded, and together we walked toward the exit, leaving Sharon and Keith behind amid the shards of the life they'd built on lies. As the doors slid open and sunlight poured in, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for 15 years. The weeks that followed brought everything full circle. Jessica later told me Keith had demanded the DNA test. It came back exactly as I expected. The child wasn't his. Their perfect little family imploded overnight. He divorced her, took everything, and disappeared. Sharon tried to smear his name, but the truth caught up with her faster than her lies could run. I didn't rejoice. There was no satisfaction left to find. Justice had a quiet way of finishing its work without my help. As for us, me and Kyle, our story only grew brighter. He graduated college with honors, earned a scholarship to medical school, and last spring, he got engaged to a kind young woman who looked at him the way I once wished someone would look at me, like he was something sacred. On his 25th birthday, I took him out to a restaurant with white tablecloths and soft jazz humming in the background. When the waiter poured champagne, I raised my glass, my voice trembling just slightly. To you, I said. To the boy who taught me what strength looks like. To the man who made every battle worth fighting. Kyle clinked his glass against mine, his smile small and certain. To us, he said softly. We made it. In that moment, I thought of the letter that had started it all, of Sharon's perfect loops of handwriting, of the words that once ended my life. And I realized something. She'd been right about one thing. By the time I read that letter, she and Keith really had gone off to start a new life. But so had I. The difference was mine was worth living.